to give you a sense of the personality of the man we're talking about. Physical appearance, probably not so accurate, but gives you a sense of who he is. That ship is going to remain here in Virginia, so is Captain Ratcliffe. As one of the leaders of the colony, the ship is going to basically serve like their pickup truck. It's the ship they're going to use to explore the region, trade with the Indians. That ship's goal is to go all the way down around the end of the James River here, and when it goes around this corner, it's going to then pop out through the Golden Gate Bridge out into the Pacific Ocean. Just around that corner. That's the plan. The plan does not work. And it doesn't work because they've made a slight miscalculation. They've miscalculated the size of the planet by about 6,000 miles of circumference. You know, something small, like Asia. But because of that, they really think everything's a lot closer together, so they really expect that you can zip across this continent here with a river like this. That's what the ship's job is. It's going to do really good work for all the other parts of its job other than making it to the Pacific. The last ship, the Godspeed, is commanded by Captain Bartholomew Gosnold. It's going to carry 52 men across the ocean. 39 were colonists, 13 were sailors. Captain Gosnold was an explorer by trade. He's been to the New World before as well, mapping and naming places, mostly in what we now call New England. 2 of those places still bear the names he gave them. The first was a cape up in New England with a lot of fish in it. Cape Cod, very good. The other was a gift named after his daughter, Martha. Martha's Vineyard. So those are the 2 places he named that still bear the names he gave them. Now, all 3 ships depart London, England on December 20th, 1606, for what should be a 3-month trip across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, all 3 of these ships are what are called square-rigged vessels. Their square-rigged means that they need to have the wind somewhere behind them to push the ships forward because their sails are square or perpendicular with the keel. So that way, if the wind blows northward, anyway, the ships go north. If the wind blows southward, the ships go south. If the wind blows northward and you want to go south, you're stuck, known as a contrary wind. The second problem you can run into, the wind stops blowing, known as becalmed. The third problem you can run into, storms. They call them storms. Thanks for the pity laugh, guys. Ships make it right out of the Thames River and have to drop anchor, waiting out for bad weather. 6 weeks later, they finally leave the English Channel. So imagine, sir, you're sitting in your car, you've just turned on the engine, you get into the driveway, and there's a car coming in behind you, and you have to wait for a little while, and 6 weeks later, you just left the driveway. How do you all feel?
Slow.
Yeah, it's not great. This is kind of slow. That's how the colonists are going to feel. The captains, however, figure out that they have more than enough food, drink, and supplies to make the trip across. They were planning on 6 months for sailing anyway, so they figure they can make up some time and maybe get some supplies out of the Caribbean. So not a big deal. They continue south following the trade winds. Now the trade winds are a consistent wind current. They come down the coast of Europe towards Africa, swoop through the South Atlantic into the Caribbean, hurricane track for anyone who follows such things. Up into the Caribbean, it shatters into 1,000 parts, zigzagging all through the different islands, reforms off the coast of Florida, zips up the coast of North America, and then swings back towards Europe, making a giant circle. The winds and water currents have been following the same basic pattern for about 10,000 years or so, making this a very reliable way to sail your ships. The bad news, Columbus did it first, which means the Spanish have been setting up bases all along the way on the bigger islands. Their first stop, the Canary Islands, right off the coast of Africa. Spanish territory, but Captain Newport's able to get in, resupply, and out of the area without the Spanish ever really knowing who they were. They zip across the trade winds, no problem, and they hit the Caribbean. They're going to stop at 6 islands in the Caribbean, the smaller uninhabited islands. Good news, folks, I will not bore you with the details of all 6, just with 2. First is the island of Nevis. Nevis is about 100 days into the trip. The colonists get off the ships and take their first, honest to goodness, bath. So, sir, you and me, cuddling down below in the tween deck areas on Susan Constant, day 99, and we have not bathed since we got on the ship. Provided we bathed the day before we got on the ship anyway, which is less likely than it should be. So just something to keep in mind. The other island is the island of Mona. Now, Mona, from what one of my Coast Guard buddies tells me, is a big, dry rock sitting in the middle of the Caribbean. Nice little beach, cliff, plateau. There's wildlife on this rock, though. There's pigs, there's iguana, there are things to hunt. So the colonists get off the ships, go running across the island to go hunting, and they passed out from the heat. One of their party, the gentleman Edward Brooks, could not be revived because the fat and blood had boiled from within him due to the heat and drought of that country, and there he died. We think that means he died from something like heat stroke, not that he literally bubbled and boiled from the inside out. He's the only death on the trip across that we know of. The remaining 104 colonists got back on the 3 ships, set sail, and arrived here off the coast of Virginia at the end of April. Spent a couple of weeks exploring the area, specifically this river, the James, which they named after their king, to then set up on an island, James Island. Put a town on it, Jamestown, the fort, James Fort. Folks, who's in charge of this colony? King James has officially absolutely nothing to do with the colony. It's the Virginia Company of London, which of course has to listen to King James. It's a political fiction. King James is not allowed to set up colonies in the New World with his treaty with Spain. So everything's done by a corporation who knows that they're actually working for the king. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's some of the basics. As a result, Jamestown makes sense if you think of it as an army base that happens to also be looking for gold, silver, and precious gems. Jamestown Island fulfills a lot of their requirements. Militarily, it's easy to defend from both land and from sea. As an island, it's hard to attack from land, and from sea, the way the river bends, it's hard for any approaching ship to shoot at the island. It's easy for the island to shoot back at a ship. Folks, if I'm worried about ships attacking the fort, who am I worried about? Spain. I welcome you to Spanish Florida. The territory of Spanish Florida goes from what we now call Key West up to about Maine. The guns in the fort, the guns on the ship, all of this military equipment, it's meant for the Spanish, not the Indians. They'll use it against the Indians, but that's not the plan. Last 2 pieces of good news about the island. 1, the Indians don't live there, so they're not going to pick a fight with the locals. And lastly, and probably most importantly, it's one of the very few spots in this end of the river that they have a natural deep water harbor, roughly 36 feet deep, right there in front of the island. The ships can sail up to the beach, tie off to the tree, and load and unload the cargo right on and off the beach, making Jamestown Island a perfect location as a supply base and a resupply base. Bad news. Half the island's a swamp, and there's no fresh water in this area. But remember 6 months of food, drink, and supplies? Figure they're dropping off enough of that here to keep the colony going. They're going to have supply issues, the heat's going to be a problem, and they'll go through the drink a lot more quickly than they really were expecting. But eventually tobacco will come to the colony, making it financially a success, and from there it'll eventually grow and thrive. 13 colonies in total will eventually form here in the North American continent. Those colonies eventually break away, forming their own country, the United States of America. Starting in a very small way, the 3 ships coming across here in 1607, dropping off the first permanent English colonists here in the New World. At this point, folks, I want to thank you all for listening to me gab, for joining us out here today. I encourage you all to go aboard our vessels, take a look about it, and then if you really want to, you should be able to head back up into the fort for that 415 musket demonstration.
Thank
Enjoy
you so
the rest
much.
of your day, folks.
Thank you.